The bolt was halfway to its housing when a pale hand closed over it, and the door warden froze. Thea Jarrell stood in the rain beyond the threshold, one hand braced against the stone arch and the other cradling the swell of her belly. Water streamed from her hair and plastered her coat to her body. She was shaking, though whether from cold or exhaustion or sheer desperation she could not have said. The warden had been refusing her entry for the better part of 5 minutes, his voice growing sharper with each iteration of the same words. The castle did not house charity cases, did not take in strays, did not open its gates to pregnant women with wild stories and nowhere else to go. Then the hand appeared, long-fingered and bloodless white, and the warden went silent. "Her name," said the voice behind him, and Thea looked up through the rain to see the man who had spoken. He was tall enough that the warden seemed to shrink in his shadow. White hair fell past his shoulders, straight and heavy as poured silk, and his eyes were the color of winter glass. His face was carved in sharp, aristocratic lines, beautiful in the way that cliffs were beautiful, and he wore black from throat to floor. Everything about him whispered of old power and older bloodlines. "Everything about him," said Vampire. "Jarrell," Thea managed, her voice hoarse. "Thea Jarrell." Something shifted in those pale eyes. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. He looked past her into the rain-drenched courtyard, then back at the warden. "Let her in." The warden stammered something about protocols and the hour and unauthorized visitors, but the Vampire King, because he could be nothing else, not with that bearing. Not with the way the warden shrank from his gaze, simply stepped aside and pulled the door open himself. Thea stumbled over the threshold. Her legs had been threatening to give out for the last quarter mile, and now that she was finally inside, finally out of the rain, they decided to make good on the threat. She staggered, caught herself on the edge of a stone bench, and tried to breathe through the wave of dizziness that swept over her. The vampire was beside her in an instant, not touching her but close enough that she could feel the unnatural stillness of him. No breath, no heartbeat, just a cold presence that should have frightened her, and instead felt strangely solid. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Thea tried to remember. This morning, perhaps, or yesterday morning. The days had blurred together since she left the tiny apartment she could no longer afford, since she packed what little she owned and set out on foot toward the only place she could think to go. "I don't know," she admitted. He turned to the warden, who was hovering uncertainly by the door. "Bring food. Bread, cheese, meat if the kitchens have it, and water. Then fetch the physician." "My lord, it's past midnight, then wake him." The warden fled. Thea closed her eyes and focused on breathing, on staying upright, on not collapsing onto the cold stone floor of this castle that smelled of old wood and older secrets. The baby shifted inside her, a rolling movement that pressed against her ribs and made her wince. "Can you walk?" the vampire asked. "Yes, then come." He did not offer his arm, did not touch her at all, but he moved slowly enough that she could follow. They passed through a vaulted entrance hall lit by electric lamps designed to look like torches, then up a flight of stairs that seemed to go on forever. Thea's legs burned with each step, but she forced herself to keep moving. She had not come this far, had not walked through the rain all evening and half the night, only to collapse now. The vampire led her to a door on the second floor and pushed it open. Inside was a sitting room with a fire already burning low in the hearth, and beyond it a bedroom with a four-poster bed that looked older than the city itself. The furniture was heavy and dark, the rugs thick, the walls hung with tapestries that depicted hunting scenes and formal courts. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. Thea sank into it gratefully. The heat from the flames seemed to seep into her bones, and she felt some of the cold finally begin to recede. She looked up at the vampire, who stood watching her with an expression that gave away nothing. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "Jarrell," he said, as though that answered everything. "Your husband was Marcus Jarrell." Her throat tightened. "You knew him." "He worked here, warden of the records, keeper of the ledgers. He was efficient and quiet, and he asked no questions." The vampire's gaze remained steady on her face. "He was found dead 2 months ago." 10 weeks, Thea said. The number was burned into her memory. "They said he was a thief. They said he stole from the Crown's accounts and tried to flee, and someone caught him. That is what the official report concluded. It was a lie." "Yes." The single word hung in the air between them. Thea stared at him, her heart suddenly pounding. "You know it was a lie? Your husband was many things, but a thief was not one of them. He handled the Crown's accounts for 3 years without a single discrepancy. Then suddenly, in the space of a single week, there were irregularities. Then he was dead." The vampire moved to the window and looked out at the rain. Convenient. Thea's hands clenched in her lap. She had known, of course. She had known from the moment the city guards came to her door with their solemn faces and their official condolences. Marcus had been careful, honest, devoted to his work to the point of obsession. He would never have stolen anything, never have betrayed a trust. But no one had believed her. No one had listened. "I want his name back," she said, and her voice shook. I want everyone to know he wasn't a thief. I want my son to grow up knowing his father was a good man." The vampire turned from the window. "Your son?" She touched her belly. 7 months. Marcus knew I was pregnant. He was so happy. The words caught in her throat, and she had to stop and breathe through the grief that rose up like a wave. He never got to meet him. There was a knock at the door. The warden entered with a tray of food and a pitcher of water, followed by a thin man in spectacles who carried a leather bag and looked deeply unhappy about being roused from sleep. The physician examined Thea with brisk efficiency, asked her a series of questions about her health and the pregnancy, and finally pronounced that she was exhausted and malnourished but otherwise sound. "Rest," he ordered. "Eat, sleep. If you have any pain or bleeding, send for me immediately." When he was gone, the vampire poured water into a glass and handed it to her. Thea drank, then made herself eat the bread and cheese even though her stomach was in knots. The vampire watched without speaking, and when she was finished, he collected the tray and set it aside. "You will stay here," he said. It was not a question. "I can't. You will stay here," he repeated, "because whoever killed your husband will come for you next. You came here for a reason, Thea Jarrell, and it was not only to ask for his name to be cleared. You came because you have something Marcus hid, something worth killing for." Thea's breath caught. She had not told him that. She had not told anyone. "How did you know?" she whispered. "Because nothing else makes sense. If he was simply an inconvenience, they would have killed him and been done with it. But they branded him a thief first. They destroyed his reputation. That suggests they were looking for something and did not find it. So they made sure that if it ever surfaced, his word would be worthless." He studied her with those cold, unreadable eyes. "You know where it is." She did. God help her, she did. Marcus had been so careful, so precise. He had left her a message hidden where only she would find it, coded in a way only she would understand. A message that told her where he had hidden the ledger. "If I give it to you," she said slowly, "will you clear his name? If you give it to me, I will find out who killed him. And when I do, I will make sure they answer for it under blood law." He moved closer, and the firelight cast shadows across his face that made him look even more inhuman. "But you will not give it to me tonight. Tonight you will rest. Tomorrow we will speak again. You're not going to force me?" "No, why not?" For the first time, something almost like expression crossed his face. "Because you came here for justice, not bargains. And because I do not make a habit of threatening pregnant widows." He moved toward the door. "There is a key on the mantel. It locks from the inside. Use it." "Wait," Thea said. "What do I call you?" He paused in the doorway. "Bastian Zohar. I am the king here." Then he was gone. And Thea was alone. She sat by the fire for a long time, her hands resting on her belly and her mind racing. Everything felt surreal, dreamlike. She was in a vampire's castle under the protection of a vampire king, carrying the one piece of evidence that could unravel a murder and a conspiracy. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt the first stirring of something she had not felt since Marcus died. Hope. She rose slowly, locked the door as Bastian had instructed, and made her way to the bed. The sheets were clean and smelled faintly of lavender. She crawled beneath the covers fully clothed, too exhausted to care about propriety or comfort, and within moments she was asleep. She dreamed of Marcus. He was standing in the rain, his face pale and his eyes sad, and he was trying to tell her something. But the words were lost in the sound of water and wind, and when she reached for him, he faded like smoke. She woke to daylight filtering through the heavy curtains and the sound of someone moving in the sitting room. For a moment, panic seized her. Then she remembered where she was and why, and she forced herself to sit up. The movement in the other room ceased. A woman appeared in the doorway, dark-haired and middle-aged, with a no-nonsense expression and a bundle of cloth in her arms. "You're awake," she said. "Good, the king said you would need clothes. I brought what I could find that might fit." She set the bundle on a chair and studied Thea with a critical eye. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Thea admitted. "But better. The physician said you need to eat regularly. I've brought breakfast." She gestured to the sitting room where a table had been laid with more food than Thea had seen in weeks. Bread, butter, jam, eggs, sausages, fruit, tea. Her stomach growled. "Thank you," Thea said. The woman inclined her head. "I'm called Margit. I manage the household. If you need anything, send for me." When she was gone, Thea washed her face in the basin provided, changed into one of the dresses. Margit had brought a simple gray wool that was slightly too large but infinitely better than her rain-soaked clothes, and sat down to eat. The food was good. Almost unbearably so after days of near starvation, and she forced herself to eat slowly despite the urge to devour everything in sight. She was finishing the last of the tea when there was a knock at the door. She tensed, then rose and crossed to open it. Bastian stood in the hallway, dressed in black as he had been the night before, his white hair bound at the nape of his neck. In the daylight, or what passed for daylight, in a castle that clearly kept its windows shuttered and curtained, he looked even more otherworldly. Pale as bone, still as death, beautiful in a way that made her chest tighten. "Walk with me," he said. It was not a request, but it was not quite a command either. Thea nodded and followed him into the hall. He led her down the stairs, through a series of corridors, and finally to a large wooden door bound with iron. He produced a key from somewhere within his coat and unlocked it. Beyond was a library. Thea caught her breath. She had never seen so many books in one place. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, packed with leather-bound volumes and loose manuscripts and rolled parchments. There were tables scattered throughout the room, their surfaces covered with ledgers and maps and documents tied with ribbon. The air smelled of old paper and ink and dust. "This was your husband's domain," Bastian said quietly. "He spent more time here than anywhere else." Thea walked forward slowly, trailing her fingers along the edge of a table. Marcus had worked here. Marcus had stood in this room, had touched these books, had carefully recorded the accounts and histories and secrets of a vampire court. She could almost feel his presence, almost hear his voice explaining some obscure detail with the quiet enthusiasm he brought to his work. "I've had everything sealed since his death," Bastian continued. "No one has touched his records. No one has entered this room except myself." Thea turned to look at him. "Why? Because I knew something was wrong, and because I thought if he had hidden something, this would be where it was." He moved to one of the tables and rested a hand on a stack of ledgers. "But I could not find it, and I could not risk anyone else finding it first." "It's not here," Thea said. "No, I did not think it was." He looked at her, his gaze sharp and measuring. "Tell me about your husband." The request caught her off guard. She had expected demands, interrogation, pressure. Not this. "He was kind," she said slowly. "Patient. He loved puzzles and mysteries, anything that required careful thought. He could spend hours working through a problem, and he never gave up until he found the answer." She touched her belly, where the baby was starting to wake and shift. "He wanted a family. We'd been trying for years, and when I finally got pregnant, he cried. I'd never seen him cry before." "What did he tell you about his work?" "Not much. He said the court valued discretion, and he took that seriously. But sometimes he would come home troubled. He'd be quiet all evening, distracted. I knew something was bothering him, but he wouldn't talk about it." "When did that start?" Thea thought back. 3 months ago, maybe. A little more. He seemed worried, like he'd found something he didn't know what to do with. Bastian's expression darkened. "And then he was dead, and then he was dead," Thea echoed. The grief rose up again, sharp and sudden, and she had to close her eyes against it. She felt the baby kick, a small flutter that reminded her she was not alone, that there was still something worth fighting for. When she opened her eyes, Bastian was watching her with something that might have been sympathy, though it was hard to tell with that impassive face. "I will clear his name," he said. "But I need to know what he found. I need to see what was worth killing him for." Thea took a breath. He hid a ledger, a copy of something he found in the accounts, something that didn't match. "He left me a message telling me where it was, but he coded it so no one else would understand." "Where is it?" "In a safe deposit box at the Third Union Bank. Under his name, with instructions that only I could access it." She met Bastian's gaze steadily. "I'll retrieve it and bring it to you, but I want something in return. Name it. I want you to restore his name before you use whatever's in that ledger. I want the city to know he wasn't a thief. I want it official, public, recorded. I want my son to grow up knowing his father was innocent." Bastian inclined his head. "Done? Just like that?" "Just like that. Your husband served this court faithfully, and he was murdered for it. His name will be cleared. You have my word." Thea wanted to ask what a vampire's word was worth, but something in his face stopped her. There was no deception there, no calculation. Just a cold, implacable certainty. "Thank you," she said quietly. "We will go tomorrow," Bastian said. "The bank does not open until 9, and you need to rest. In the meantime, you will stay in your rooms. Do not leave them without an escort. Am I a prisoner? You are a target. There is a difference." He moved toward the door, then paused. "The physician will return this afternoon to check on you. Eat, rest, regain your strength. You will need it." He left her alone in the library. Thea stood there for a long moment, surrounded by her husband's work, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her. Then she straightened her shoulders and walked back to the door. She had survived the last 10 weeks. She would survive this too. The rest of the day passed in a strange, suspended stillness. Margit brought lunch and dinner. The physician came and went with more instructions to rest and eat, and Thea spent the hours pacing her rooms and trying not to think about what would happen when they retrieved the ledger. She knew with a bone-deep certainty that Marcus had found something damning. He had been too careful, too frightened in those last weeks, for it to be anything less than explosive. And someone had killed him for it. Night fell early, winter closing in with its usual gray determination. Thea stood by the window and looked out at the courtyard below. The castle was built in the old style, all stone and iron, but it had been modernized with electricity and plumbing and all the conveniences of the current age. It sat on the edge of the city, half hidden by trees, and most people who passed it on the street probably thought it was an abandoned relic. They had no idea it housed a vampire court, a king, a whole hidden world operating in the shadows of their ordinary lives. There was a knock at the door. Thea tensed, then crossed to open it. Bastien stood there, still dressed in black, his pale eyes glinting in the lamplight. "May I come in?" She stepped aside. He entered and closed the door behind him, then moved to stand by the fireplace. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, without looking at her, he spoke. "I knew your husband was innocent from the beginning." Thea stared at him. "What?" The irregularities in the accounts were too obvious, too clumsy. Marcus Jarrell was meticulous. If he had truly been embezzling funds, he would have been far more careful about covering his tracks, and the timing was suspicious. 3 years of flawless work, then a sudden descent into theft? Bastien shook his head. It made no sense. "Then why didn't you do something?" Thea demanded, anger flaring hot and sudden in her chest. "Why didn't you stop it?" "Because I did not know who was responsible, and because I thought if I waited they would reveal themselves." He turned to face her, and there was something bleak in his expression. "I was wrong. By the time I realized how deep the conspiracy went, Marcus was already dead." Thea felt the anger drain out of her, leaving only exhaustion. "You couldn't have known. I should have. He was under my protection, working in my court. I failed him." Bastien's voice was flat, emotionless, but there was something beneath the words. Not guilt exactly, but a cold, implacable resolve. "I will not fail you." She believed him. She didn't know why, didn't know what it was about this remote, inhuman creature that made her trust him, but she did. Perhaps it was because he had not once tried to soften the truth or offer empty comfort. Perhaps it was because he treated her grief as sacred, something to be respected rather than dismissed. "Thank you," she said. He inclined his head. "Sleep tomorrow will be difficult." When he was gone, Thea locked the door and lay down on the bed. Sleep was a long time coming, but when it finally arrived, it was deep and dreamless. Morning came too soon. Thea woke to gray light and the sound of rain against the windows. She dressed in another of Margot's borrowed gowns, ate the breakfast that was brought to her, and waited. Bastien arrived just before 9, accompanied by 2 guards in dark uniforms. Both were human, both armed, and both looked at her with expressionless faces that gave nothing away. "Ready?" Bastien asked. Thea nodded. They left the castle in a black car with tinted windows, the guards in front and Bastien beside her in the back. The city streets were crowded with morning traffic, and Thea watched the familiar buildings slide past with a strange sense of dislocation. 2 months ago, she had been living a normal life. She had been a bookshop clerk with a husband and a baby on the way and no idea that vampires were real, let alone that they lived in castles and ruled hidden courts. Now Marcus was dead, and she was sitting next to a vampire king, on her way to retrieve evidence that might unravel a conspiracy. The bank was a solid stone building in the financial district, all columns and brass and respectful hush. Bastien waited in the car while Thea went inside with the guards. The clerk who helped her was polite and efficient, and within 10 minutes she was holding a slim leather portfolio that Marcus had left for her. Her hands shook as she carried it back to the car. She slid into the back seat and set the portfolio on her lap, and Bastien looked at it for a long moment before speaking. "Open it." Thea undid the clasp and pulled out the contents. There were several sheets of paper covered in Marcus's neat handwriting, along with a folded ledger that looked like it had been copied from an original. She scanned the first page and felt her stomach drop. "Oh, Marcus," she whispered. Bastien took the pages from her and read in silence. His expression did not change, but the air in the car seemed to grow colder. When he finally looked up, his eyes were glacial. "Edric Stroud," he said, and his voice was like a blade. "Master of the Guard." Thea's breath caught. "What did he do?" "He has been embezzling from the Crown's accounts for the better part of 5 years. Small amounts, carefully hidden, but when you add them all together..." Bastien looked down at the ledger again. Marcus must have been auditing the records when he found the discrepancies. And when he started asking questions, Edric killed him. "Can you prove it?" "With yes. Every transaction is documented, every date and amount recorded." Marcus was thorough. There was something almost like grief in Bastien's voice. He knew what he had found. He knew it would get him killed, but he documented it anyway because that was the kind of man he was. Thea pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting back tears. Marcus had been so brave, so determined to do the right thing even when it cost him everything. And she had not even known. She had not known what he was facing, what danger he was in. He had kept it all to himself, trying to protect her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I call a blood court. Edric Stroud will stand trial before the assembled nobles and answer for his crimes. If he is found guilty, he will be executed." Bastien's gaze met hers. "And your husband's name will be cleared." The trial took place 3 days later. In the interim, Thea remained in her rooms at the castle, eating and resting and trying not to think about what was coming. Bastien visited her once each day, usually in the evening, to inform her of developments. He spoke little, his manner formal and distant, but there was a strange comfort in his presence. He asked nothing of her, demanded nothing, simply ensured that she was cared for and safe. On the third evening he came to her rooms and found her standing by the window, one hand resting on her belly. The baby had been restless all day, kicking and squirming as though he could sense her anxiety. "The court convenes tomorrow night," Bastian said without preamble. "You may attend if you wish, but you are not required to." Thea turned to face him. "I want to be there. It will not be pleasant. I don't care. I need to see it. I need to know that he's held accountable." Bastian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. But you will sit in the gallery, and you will have guards with you at all times. If anything happens, they will remove you immediately." What could happen? Edric has allies, supporters, men who will not take kindly to seeing him brought down. There may be unrest. Thea lifted her chin. "I'm not afraid, you should be." Bastian moved closer, and for the first time she saw something like concern in his face. "You are carrying a child, Thea Jarrell. You have already lost your husband. Do not make yourself a target for revenge." "I'm already a target," she said quietly. "You said so yourself, and I've been running scared for 10 weeks. I'm done running. Marcus deserves to have someone there who loved him, who will stand for him when he can't stand for himself. I owe him that." Bastian's expression softened, just a fraction. "He was fortunate to have you. I was fortunate to have him." The grief rose up again, but this time she did not fight it. She let it wash over her, let herself feel the full weight of everything she had lost. "He was a good man. He deserved better than this." "Yes," Bastian said quietly. "He did." The trial began at midnight. Thea had thought that was theatrical until Bastian explained that vampires found it easier to gather after dark, when the risk of sunlight was non-existent and the city's human population was largely asleep. The courtroom, a vast stone chamber deep in the heart of the castle, was lit by chandeliers and filled with vampires in formal dress. They watched Thea with cold, curious eyes as she entered with her guards and took her seat in the gallery. Bastian stood at the center of the room, his white hair unbound and falling past his shoulders, his black coat trimmed with silver. He looked every inch the king, remote and terrible and beautiful. When he spoke, his voice carried through the chamber without effort. "We are convened to hear the case against Edric Stroud, Master of the Guard, charged with theft, murder, and conspiracy. Let the accused be brought forward." Edric Stroud was a tall, broad-shouldered vampire with dark hair and a face like carved granite. He walked into the chamber flanked by guards, his expression defiant. When he saw Thea in the gallery, his eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. The trial was swift and brutal. Bastian presented the ledger, walking the assembled court through each transaction, each discrepancy, each piece of evidence that Marcus had so carefully compiled. He called witnesses who testified to Edric's movements on the night of Marcus's death, to the rumors of his gambling debts and expensive tastes. He laid out the case with cold, methodical precision, and by the time he was finished there was no doubt left. Edric tried to defend himself. He claimed the ledger was forged, that Marcus had been the true thief and was trying to frame him. But his arguments were weak, his evidence non-existent, and when Bastian asked him to explain why Marcus would frame him and then die without revealing the forgery, Edric had no answer. The vote was unanimous. Guilty on all counts, Bastian stood before the accused, his face expressionless. "Edric Stroud, you are found guilty of theft from the crown, of murder, and of conspiracy to conceal your crimes. Under blood law, the sentence is death. Do you have anything to say?" Edric's face twisted with rage. "You think you've won? You think this ends anything? There are others." "Bastian, others who know what I know, who will face the same justice if they reveal themselves," Bastian interrupted, his voice cold. "I suggest you use your last moments for something other than threats." Edric spat at his feet. "Go to hell. After you." The execution was carried out immediately in a courtyard behind the castle. Thea did not watch. She remained in the gallery, her hands resting on her belly, and listened to the sound of steel and finality. When it was done, one of the guards came to escort her back to her rooms. Bastian found her there an hour later. She was sitting by the fire, staring into the flames, and she did not look up when he entered. "It's done," he said quietly. "I know." He crossed to the chair opposite hers and sat, his movements careful and deliberate. "Your husband's name will be restored, the official records will be corrected, and a public statement will be issued tomorrow. By week's end, everyone in the city will know that Marcus Jarrell was innocent." Thea nodded. She felt numb, hollowed out. She had wanted this, had fought for it, but now that it was done, she felt only a vast, aching emptiness. "Thank you," she said. It was owed. Bastian leaned back in his chair, his pale eyes reflecting the firelight. "What will you do now?" The question hung in the air. Thea had not thought past this moment. She had been so focused on clearing Marcus's name, on surviving day to day, that she had not considered what came after. She was 7 months pregnant, widowed, alone. She had no job, no home, no family to turn to. "I don't know," she admitted. "You may stay here." She looked at him in surprise. "What?" You may stay here, Bastian repeated. The position of warden of records is vacant. You could take it. Thea blinked. I'm not qualified. I worked in a bookshop. Not you are more qualified than you think. You understand the work. You knew your husband's mind, and you have a vested interest in ensuring the records remain honest. He met her gaze steadily. And you will need an income, a home, security. I can provide all of that. Why? Thea asked. Why would you do this for me? Because your husband died in my service, and I owe him a debt I cannot repay. And because you came here seeking justice, not charity, and you deserve the chance to rebuild your life with dignity. He paused. And because I want you to stay. The last words were spoken quietly, almost hesitantly, and Thea's breath caught. She studied his face, searching for the meaning behind them, but his expression was as unreadable as ever. I don't understand, she said. Neither do I. Bastian rose and moved to the window, looking out at the night. You have been here less than a week, and yet you have managed to become a presence. The castle feels different with you in it. I find myself thinking about whether you have eaten, whether you are resting, whether you are safe. It is inconvenient. Thea almost laughed. Inconvenient, yes. He turned to face her, and there was something raw in his expression, something she had not seen before. I have lived for 300 years, Thea Jarrell. I have ruled this court for 2 centuries. I have seen empires rise and fall, watched the world change in ways no human could imagine, and in all that time I have never felt for anyone what I am beginning to feel for you. Her heart was pounding. What are you saying? I am saying that I would like you to stay, not as a charity case, not as an obligation, but because I want you here, because I find myself looking for excuses to see you, to speak with you, to be near you, because when I think about you leaving, something in me rebels at the idea. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the fine lines of his face, the inhuman pallor of his skin. And I am saying that if you stay, I will protect you and your son with everything I have. No one will harm you, no one will threaten you. You will be safe and cared for, and valued. Thea's eyes stung with tears. She had not expected this. She had not expected kindness, let alone whatever this was. Affection, attraction, something deeper? I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you will think about it. Say you will not leave tomorrow. That is all I ask. She looked at him, this ancient, inhuman creature who had given her justice and safety, and now, impossibly, something that felt almost like hope, and she found herself nodding. I'll stay, she said, at least for now. The relief in his face was unmistakable. Thank you. In the days that followed, Thea settled into a routine. She spent her mornings in the library learning the systems Marcus had used, familiarizing herself with the ledgers and records. She was no expert, but she was a fast learner, and the work gave her a sense of purpose. In the afternoons she rested, and in the evenings Bastian came to her rooms and they talked. They talked about everything. About Marcus, and the grief that still sat heavy in her chest. About the baby and her fears for the future. About the castle and the court and the strange hidden world of vampires that existed alongside the human one. Bastian spoke little of himself, but what he did say painted a picture of a long, solitary existence. He had been turned in the 16th century, had fought in wars and lived through plagues and revolutions. He had outlived friends, lovers, everyone he had ever cared about. He had learned to keep his distance, to rule with a cold detachment that protected him from the pain of loss. But with Thea, that detachment was crumbling. She saw it in the way he looked at her, in the way his voice softened when he spoke to her, in the way he found excuses to touch her hand or brush a strand of hair from her face. And she felt it in herself, too. The way her heart lifted when he entered the room. The way she found herself watching for him, listening for his footsteps in the hall. The way she had started, impossibly, to care for him. It should not have been possible. Marcus had been dead less than 3 months. She should have been drowning in grief, not falling for someone new. But the heart, she was learning, did not follow rules. And Bastian was not a replacement for Marcus. He was something else entirely. Something unexpected and strange and undeniably real. One evening as they sat by the fire, Thea felt the baby kick with unusual force. She gasped and pressed a hand to her belly, and Bastian was beside her in an instant. What is it? Are you in pain? No, he's just, she laughed, breathless. He's strong, feel. She took his hand and placed it on her belly, and they both went still. After a moment the baby kicked again, a firm, rolling movement beneath Bastian's palm. His eyes widened and something like wonder crossed his face. That's him? He asked, his voice hushed. That's him. Thea smiled. He's been restless all day. I think he's running out of room. Bastian kept his hand there, feeling the baby move, and when he finally looked up at her, there was something achingly vulnerable in his expression. I envy him, he said quietly. He will grow up knowing you. He will have your strength, your courage. He will never doubt that he is loved. You could know me too, Thea said. The words were out before she could stop them, but she did not regret them. If you wanted, I do want, Bastian said. More than I should, more than is wise. Why isn't it wise? Because you are human and I am not. Because you are grieving, and I am taking advantage of that. Because you deserve someone who can give you a normal life, and I can offer nothing but shadows and secrets and the constant threat of danger. I don't want normal, Thea said. I tried normal. I had normal. And it ended with Marcus dead in a canal and me fleeing through the rain with nowhere to go. Normal didn't save me. You did. Thea, I'm not saying I'm ready for anything, she interrupted. I'm not saying I've stopped grieving, or that I'm not scared, or that this makes any kind of sense. But I am saying that when you're here, I feel less alone. And when you're not, I miss you. And that has to mean something. Bastien closed his eyes. It means everything. He leaned forward and rested his forehead against hers, and they stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, feeling the same warmth from the fire. The baby kicked again, a reminder of the life growing between them, the future that was still uncertain but no longer entirely bleak. 2 weeks later, Thea officially took the position of Warden of Records. Bastien made the announcement at a court gathering, and if anyone objected to a pregnant human woman taking charge of the castle's archives, they were wise enough not to voice it. Thea moved into a larger suite of rooms on the first floor, closer to the library, with a sitting room and a bedroom and a smaller room that could serve as a nursery. Margaret helped her prepare, bringing linens and blankets and tiny clothes that someone had dug out of storage. Thea folded them carefully, her hands shaking. In less than 2 months she would be a mother. In less than 2 months her son would be here, and she would be responsible for keeping him safe and healthy and happy. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Bastien knocked on her door one evening and found her sitting on the floor of the nursery, surrounded by half-assembled furniture. "Do you need help?" he asked, a note of amusement in his voice. "I need someone who knows how to read instructions," Thea said, holding up a page covered in diagrams. "I think this is for a crib, but I can't be sure." Bastien knelt beside her and took the paper, studying it with the same focus he brought to everything. Within minutes, he had identified the pieces and started assembling them with efficient, precise movements. Thea watched, oddly charmed by the sight of a vampire king putting together baby furniture. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I want to." He glanced at her, his pale eyes warm. "Besides, I have been building things for 300 years. I am more qualified than you think." By the time the crib was finished, it was past midnight. Thea stood and stretched, her back aching, and Bastien caught her elbow to steady her. "Careful," he said. "I'm fine, just tired. Then rest." He guided her to the bedroom and waited while she settled onto the bed. Then, hesitantly, he sat on the edge beside her. "May I stay?" Thea's heart jumped. "Stay, just here, just for a while. I will not touch you unless you ask. I do not want to leave yet." She understood. She felt the same pull, the same reluctance to let the evening end. "You can stay." He stretched out beside her, careful to keep a respectful distance, and they lay there in the darkness, listening to each other breathe. Thea's hand rested on her belly, feeling the baby's small, fluttering movements, and after a moment Bastien's hand covered hers. "What will you name him?" he asked. Thea had been thinking about that for weeks. "Emeric," she said finally. "It was my father's name, Emeric," Bastien repeated, testing the sound of it. "It suits." They fell asleep like that, hands linked, the baby moving between them. And when Thea woke in the morning, Bastien was gone, but there was a note on the pillow beside her. "Thank you for letting me stay." 3 weeks before Emeric was born, the castle received a visitor. Thea was in the library when Bastien found her, his expression tight. "We have a problem," he said, without preamble. Thea set down the ledger she had been reviewing. "What kind of problem?" "A vampire named Lucien Devereaux has requested an audience. He is old, powerful, and ambitious, and he was a close associate of Edric Stroud." Thea's stomach dropped. "You think he's here for revenge?" "I think he is here to assess the situation. If he believes I am vulnerable, he will challenge me. If he believes you are unprotected, he will move against you. So what do? We show him that neither of those things is true." Bastien moved closer, his gaze intense. "Tonight you will sit beside me at court. You will be introduced as the Warden of Records under my personal protection, and you will make it clear that any threat against you is a threat against me." Thea swallowed hard. "I've never been to a formal court, I know, but you are strong and you are clever and you will not falter. I will be with you every moment." That night, Thea dressed in a gown of deep blue velvet that Margaret had found somewhere in the castle's storage. It fit snugly across her swollen belly and she felt awkward and ungainly, but when she saw Bastien's face as she entered the great hall, she knew she looked exactly as he had hoped. Regal, untouchable. The court was assembled, a sea of pale faces and dark clothing. Lucien Devereaux stood at the center, a tall, elegant vampire with silver hair and a smile that did not reach his eyes. He watched Thea with undisguised curiosity as she took her seat beside Bastien. "So this is the famous widow," Lucien said, his voice smooth. "I confess I am intrigued. It is not every day that a human takes a position of power in a vampire court." "Thea Jarrell is Warden of Records," Bastien said coldly. "She has earned her place here through merit and courage, and she is under my protection." Let that be understood. Of course, of course. Lucien inclined his head, but there was something mocking in the gesture. Still, it is an unusual arrangement. One might even call it unprecedented. One might call it progress, Thea said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. The court benefits from honesty and transparency. That is what I bring. Lucien's smile widened. Bold words. I wonder if you will still be so bold when the child is born, and you realize the dangers of raising a human infant in a house of predators. The words were calculated, designed to strike fear, but Thea refused to flinch. My son will be raised in safety, surrounded by people who value honor and justice. He will have nothing to fear, unless of course something were to happen to his protector. Lucien's gaze slid to Bastien. Kings can be overthrown after all. Even vampire kings. The hall went silent. Thea felt the tension coil like a spring, and she knew they were on the edge of something dangerous. But before she could speak, Bastien rose from his seat. If you have a challenge to make, Lucien, make it now. Otherwise, hold your tongue and remember that you are a guest in my court, and guests who insult their hosts are not invited back. Lucien studied him for a long moment, then laughed. No challenge, not tonight. I merely wish to see the woman who has captured the king's attention. I am satisfied. He left shortly after, and the court dispersed. Thea sagged in her seat, the adrenaline draining out of her. Bastien was beside her immediately, his hand on her shoulder. Are you all right? I think so. That was, she stopped, searching for the word. Terrifying. You were magnificent. Bastien's voice was low, fierce. You did not flinch, you did not falter. You showed him exactly what I needed him to see. What was that you belong here? That you are not some fragile human to be preyed upon, but a woman of strength and intelligence who has earned her place, and that anyone who threatens you will answer to me. He cupped her face in his hands, his pale eyes blazing. I am so proud of you. Thea's breath caught. Then, before she could think better of it, she leaned forward and kissed him. For a moment, Bastien went utterly still. Then his arms came around her, careful of her belly, and he kissed her back with a hunger that took her breath away. It was not gentle, it was not tentative. It was a claiming, a promise, a declaration. When they finally broke apart, both of them were shaking. Thea, Bastien whispered, his forehead pressed to hers. Are you certain? No, she admitted. But I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of holding back. I want this. I want you. You have me, he said. For as long as you want me, for as long as I live, you have all of me. They went to her rooms together, and for the first time since Marcus died, Thea allowed herself to feel something other than grief. Bastien was careful with her, achingly gentle as though she might break, but she was not fragile. She was strong and alive and determined to claim whatever happiness she could from the ashes of her old life. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Bastien traced absent patterns on her skin. I never thought I would feel this again, he said quietly. I thought I had buried this part of myself centuries ago. But you brought it back, I'm glad, Thea said. She rested her hand over his, linking their fingers. I was afraid I would never feel anything again, that Marcus's death had broken something in me that couldn't be fixed. But you showed me that wasn't true. You showed me I could still hope. I will spend the rest of my existence ensuring you never lose that hope, Bastien said. I swear it. Emeric was born on a cold night in January, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Thea's water broke while she was working in the library, and within an hour she was at the throes of labor, gripping the edges of the bed and trying to remember how to breathe. Bastien was there the entire time. He held her hand, spoke to her in a low, steady voice, and did not flinch when she screamed or cursed or threatened to kill him for getting her into this situation. The physician worked with calm efficiency, and just before dawn, Emeric came into the world with a thin, furious wail. Thea wept when they placed him in her arms. He was tiny and red and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn brown like Marcus's. She held him close and whispered his name over and over, and when she looked up, Bastien was watching them both with an expression of such raw tenderness that it took her breath away. He's beautiful, Bastien said. He's perfect. Thea touched Emeric's tiny hand and his fingers curled around hers. Marcus would have loved him. He would have. And he would have been proud of you. The first weeks were exhausting. Emeric was a good baby, but he was still a baby, and Thea found herself stumbling through a haze of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Bastien helped as much as he could, sitting with her in the dark hours and holding Emeric when her arms ached. He could not feed the child, but he could change him and rock him and sing to him in a language Thea did not recognize. It was strange and wonderful and utterly surreal, this ancient vampire cradling her infant son as though he were the most precious thing in the world. As Emeric grew, so did Thea's certainty. She loved Bastien. She loved the way he looked at her son, the way he made her laugh, the way he treated her grief as something sacred rather than an inconvenience. She loved the way he protected her without suffocating her, the way he respected her strength while still offering his own. And she knew with a bone-deep certainty that she wanted to spend the rest of her life with him, There was only one problem. She was human, and he was not. She would age and die, and he would remain unchanged. The thought of leaving him, of abandoning Emeric to grow up without her, was unbearable. 6 months after Emeric's birth, she brought it up. They were sitting in the library, Emeric asleep in a basket nearby, and Thea was reviewing the monthly accounts when the words suddenly spilled out. "I want to turn." Bastien looked up sharply. "What? I want to turn," Thea repeated. She set down her pen and met his gaze. "I want to become a vampire. I want to stay with you. And I want to be here for Emeric as he grows up. I don't want to leave you." Bastien's face went carefully blank. "Thea, do you understand what you are asking?" "Yes, I've been thinking about it for months. I know what it means. I know I'll never see the sun again, that I'll have to drink blood, that I'll outlive everyone I know. But I also know that I want to be with you, and I want to be here for my son, for as long as possible. If that means turning, then I'm ready. Are you certain?" "Turning is irreversible. Once it is done, there is no going back. I'm certain." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I love you, Bastien. I want a future with you, and I want Emeric to have a mother who will be there for him. Not just for a few decades, but for as long as he needs me." Bastien closed his eyes. "If I do this, I need you to understand something. You will not turn immediately. We will wait until Emeric is older, until you are certain this is what you want. And we will discuss every detail, every consequence, every risk. I will not take this lightly. I don't expect you to, but I need to know you'll do it. I need to know that this is possible." He opened his eyes and looked at her, and the love in his gaze was almost overwhelming. "It is possible. And if this is truly what you want, then when the time is right, I will turn you myself, but only when you are ready. Only when Emeric is old enough to understand." "How old?" 5 years, perhaps 6. Old enough that he has memories of you as you are, and old enough to be told the truth about what we are." Thea nodded. 5 years. She could wait 5 years, and in the meantime, she would live every moment to the fullest, would cherish every sunrise and every breath and every second with her son. The years passed swiftly. Emeric grew into a bright, curious child with his father's thoughtful nature and his mother's determination. He adored Bastien, called him Papa without hesitation, and never questioned the fact that his family was different from others. To him it was simply normal that his mother worked in a castle, that his papa never went out in the daytime, that the people around them were pale and strange and moved with inhuman grace. When Emeric was 5, Thea and Bastien sat him down and explained. They told him about vampires, about the turning, about what it would mean for his mother. Emeric listened with wide eyes, asked a dozen questions, and then, with the simple acceptance of childhood, declared that it was fine as long as Mama was happy. Thea turned on a night in late autumn, 1 year after that conversation. Bastien performed the ritual himself, his voice steady and his hands gentle as he drained her to the edge of death, and then fed her his own blood. The transformation was agony, but Thea endured it, knowing what waited on the other side. She woke 3 days later to a world transformed. Colors were sharper, sounds clearer, scents richer. She could hear Emeric's heartbeat from 2 floors away, could smell the rain before it fell, could feel the hum of life in everything around her. And when she looked at Bastien, she saw him truly for the first time. Not just his face, but the centuries in his eyes, the weight of history and loss and love. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Alive," Thea said, and laughed at the irony. "More alive than I've ever felt." He pulled her into his arms and held her, and for the first time in 3 centuries, Bastien Zohar allowed himself to hope for a future that did not end in loss. A month later, the court convened for a formal ceremony. Thea stood before the assembled vampires in a gown of crimson and silver, Emeric at her side and Bastien beside her. The room was silent as Bastien spoke. "We are here to witness the investiture of Thea Jarrell as Warden of the Ledger, a position of trust and authority within this court. She has proven herself through courage, integrity, and dedication. She has served this court faithfully both as human and now as one of us, and she has my absolute confidence and protection." He turned to Thea and held out a silver key, ornate and heavy. "This is the key to the archives. It is yours by right, and it symbolizes the trust this court places in you. Guard it well." Thea took the key, her fingers steady. "I swear to uphold the integrity of the records, to serve this court with honesty, and to protect the truth, no matter the cost. I swear this on my son's life and my own." The court erupted in applause, a sound that echoed through the stone chamber. Thea looked at Bastien, and he smiled at her, a rare, genuine expression that made her heart soar. Emeric tugged on her skirt. "Mama, can we go home now?" Thea scooped him up, balancing him on her hip, and laughed. "Yes, little one, we can go home. Home." The word settled over her like a blessing. This was home now. This castle, this court, this strange, beautiful family she had built from the ruins of her old life. She had come here a widow, desperate and alone, seeking nothing more than justice for the man she had lost. And she had found something she never expected. She had found love. She had found purpose. She had found a future. And when she looked at Bastien, at the way he watched her with Emeric in her arms, she knew that whatever came next they would face it together. Not as king and subject, not as vampire and human, but as partners, as equals, as family. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, threats, dangers they could not yet foresee. But Thea had faced worse and survived. She had walked through grief and come out the other side. She had knocked on a castle door at midnight with nothing but desperation and hope, and the vampire king had let her in, and he had never let her leave. Not because he held her captive, but because she chose to stay. Because she had found in this place of shadows and secrets something worth holding on to. She had found a home. She had found love. And she had found, at last, a reason to believe in tomorrow. Bastien stepped closer and rested his hand on Emeric's head, his touch gentle. Ready to go? Thea shifted Emeric higher on her hip and reached for Bastien's hand with her free one. Their fingers intertwined, and she felt the familiar coolness of his skin, the strength in his grip. Ready, she said. They left the chamber together, the three of them, and the door closed behind them with a soft final sound. Somewhere in the castle the records waited, carefully preserved and guarded. Somewhere in the city beyond, life went on, ordinary and unaware of the hidden world that existed in its shadows. But here, in this moment, there was only them. A family forged from loss and love, bound together by choice and devotion and the unbreakable certainty that they belonged to each other. Thea had come to the castle seeking justice for the past. What she found instead was a future worth fighting for. And as they walked through the torch-lit corridors, Emeric chattering happily about something he had seen earlier, and Bastien listening with the patient attention he gave to everything the boy said, Thea felt a peace settle over her that she had not known since Marcus died. She would always love Marcus. He would always have a place in her heart, a sacred space that held the memories of their time together. But grief and love were not mutually exclusive. She could honor what she had lost while embracing what she had found. She could carry her past and still move forward into the future. And that future looked bright. In the years that followed, Thea became one of the most respected figures in the court. Her reputation for honesty and fairness spread beyond the castle walls, and vampires from other territories began to seek her counsel on matters of record-keeping and archival practice. She modernized the systems, implemented new safeguards, and trained a small staff of assistants who shared her commitment to transparency. Emeric grew into a confident, intelligent young man who moved easily between the human and vampire worlds. He understood the danger, the secrecy, the delicate balance that had to be maintained, but he also understood the honor and loyalty that bound the court together. When he turned 18, he chose to follow in his mother's footsteps and took a position as an apprentice in the archives. Learning the craft that had meant so much to both his fathers, Bastien remained as he had always been, steady, protective, devoted. But there was a lightness to him now, a warmth that had not been there before Thea entered his life. He laughed more, he smiled more. He allowed himself to feel joy in a way he had not permitted himself in centuries, and Thea, who had once thought her life was over, discovered that it had only just begun. She had knocked on a castle door at midnight, pregnant and desperate and terrified. The vampire king had opened that door, had given her shelter and safety and justice. And then, slowly and inevitably, he had given her his heart. She had never left because she had never wanted to. Because she had found, in the most unlikely of places, the thing she needed most. She had found home. On quiet evenings, when the castle was still and Emeric was occupied with his studies, Thea would sit with Bastien by the fire in their private chambers. Sometimes they talked, sharing thoughts and memories and plans for the future. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, content to be near each other. One such evening, Bastien reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her skin. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "The choice you made?" Thea looked at him, at the face she knew as well as her own, at the eyes that held centuries of experience and the heart that belonged entirely to her. "Never," she said, "not for a single moment." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it, a gesture of reverence and love. "I waited 300 years for you. Then I'd say we have a lot of time to make up for." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face, and pulled her close. She rested her head against his shoulder and felt the steady, eternal stillness of him. She was part of that eternity now. Part of his world, his life, his future. The widow who had knocked on the castle door at midnight was gone. In her place was a woman who had been broken and rebuilt, who had lost everything and found something better. A woman who had turned pain into purpose, grief into strength, and desperation into hope. The vampire king had never let her leave, but more importantly, she had never wanted to go. This was her place. This was her family. This was her forever. And she would spend every moment of that forever grateful for the night she knocked on a castle door, and the king who answered, and the love that grew from the ashes of everything she had lost. It was not the ending she had imagined for herself. But it was the one she had been meant for all along, and it was perfect.